Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 44 of my 2019 reads. This week was a very good reading week. I finished 3 books, all of which were excellent. The first book that I finished was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Fredrik Backman. Backman is such a great Scandinavian writer. I have read a couple of different books by him, and all of them have this beautiful sense of heart. Lots of sweet stories, lots of humor, often some bittersweet moments, some sadness, but really gorgeous stories. And although I have read quite a few books of his, I had not read this one yet. Recently I saw Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, who I will link below, talk about this book, and it made me really want to pick it up. I'm so glad I did. I really needed a pick-me-up after last week when I read the Overstory and was not so pleased. So I started my week with this book and it fit the bill so perfectly. It's a story told from the perspective of a 7-year-old girl who is maybe a little bit neuroatypical, and she is struggling, doesn't really fit in, feels very isolated, but her grandmother is sort of her lodestone. Her grandmother is this kind of wild and completely non-typical person who just does what she wants to do and has no cares to give. Her grandmother creates this beautiful make-believe world, and the little girl and she sort of spend all of their time in this make-believe world. Over the course of the story, you learn more about this make-believe world, and you also see the little girl as she delivers all of these apology letters from her grandmother to various people who her grandmother has maybe not been the best towards. Her grandmother is a little bit abrasive at times, and it's beautiful. It unfolds this story of connection, this story of recognizing our faults, recognizing when we make bad choices, but also trying to form those connections. And it's really quite beautiful. I think that in the beginning of the story, when it focuses so much on that make-believe world, it can get a little tedious at times. There's just, all these fantastical creatures and these sorts of things. So I found that part a little bit hard to get through in the beginning. But as the story goes on, a lot of that is connected to the real world, and it becomes very, very moving. And like all of Fredrik Backman's work, I cried a ton at the end. I really loved this book. So it was super sweet, even though it did start a little bit slower. Overall, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished Still Alice by Lisa Genova. This is probably one of my favorite books of the decade, not just of this year. It is spectacular. I loved this book. It's so good. Still Alice is the story of Alice, who is a professor of psycholinguistics at Harvard, and she is diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And the story just follows her as the disease progresses and she deteriorates, and it really looks at a lot of interesting themes related to how she defines herself and how she lives her life as the disease progresses. It's told from her perspective. I am going to have a video out later this week really talking about those themes, so I won't go into a ton of depth here, but they are very, very powerful. And I think that this book just does such a great job of really telling the story of somebody who is facing a very severe disability and being a voice for them. This is not Own Voices, but it is a voice for somebody with Alzheimer's, and especially given that many people with Alzheimer's don't have a voice because of the nature of the disease. I thought it was so perfect, and I'm really, really glad that I picked this up for my month focusing on disability reads. So I highly recommend this book. There is also a movie adaptation, which was very, very good. I saw that a couple of years ago. So I'm super glad that I read the book as well. And there is a video that Madelyn with Made with Books did that looks especially at the themes of dementia in Still Alice that I think is spectacular. I highly recommend that you check that out if you have already read the book or watched the movie, so I will link that below. Overall, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I think this is just one of the best books that I've read in a very long time. And lastly, I finished a reread of Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This I had read back in September. I talked about it in my week 36 reads, so I will link that below if you want to hear what I have to say about it. And this time I read it aloud to my husband, Sush. He loved it as much as I did. The ending is just so spectacular. I had such a hard time reading through it because I was so choked up about it. But this book is really, really such a fun, great read, focusing on Mayan mythology, focusing on a woman and her journey to kind of discovering herself through this quest with a Mayan death god. It's spectacular. I highly recommend it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I won't go into more depth here, but you can check out my previous week 36 video if you want to hear more. So that wraps up week 44 for me. I was so pleased to have such a great reading week after last week was a little bit more of a challenge for me. And I am really looking forward to the rest of November and December. We have just 2 months left in the year, and there are about 1 billion books that I want to read, so I will get on it.